There's the entire accusation that white South Africans never ended apartheid out of the goodness of their hearts. And this is true. Today, I will be playing devil's advocate, presenting another perspective on the old white South Africa. I will be presenting some other opinions on perhaps why South Africans were so reluctant to end apartheid. First off, we have that old question, the old red under every bed, as known by such great communist hunters like McCarthy. Nowadays, one may laugh at communism or one may like. However, during the Cold War, it was not all that funny. In fact, communism was actually a serious threat. It is poignant to note that the demise of apartheid correlated so conveniently with the demise of communism in Eastern Europe. Though the liberation movements of South Africa had morally gained the support of many Western countries, they, however, unwittingly found themselves as strategic partners with the Eastern Bloc, who provided military and strategic support for the armed struggle. To top things, the liberation movement also accepted training and assistance and arms from various rogue states like Libya. And seeing exactly who their strategic partners were, did not galvanize much support amongst white South Africans for the liberation movement. In fact, it further alienated them in an age of communist and rogue state thuggery. This was also translated in the kinds of methods used by the liberation movements. There were landmines placed on rural roads. They also placed mini limpet mines in wimpy bars. In fact, I remember as a child having to run my hands under the table and check under the table for mini limpet mines. They were, in fact, according to our opinion, terrorists. Now, we mustn't define them as terrorists according to our own opinion today in the post-9/11 climate. Instead, we must look at them relative to their own time, relative to the time of Cold War terrorism. Though I will acknowledge the legitimacy of the liberation movement struggle, I will, however, robustly criticize them on the methods employed to achieve their objectives. Far from drawing attention to their cause, the deliberate targeting of civilians caused many white South Africans to become distrustful and to lack confidence in the liberation movements. As a consequence, it had a paradoxical effect. To many, reform did not seem like a viable alternative at the time. Naturally, the South African state had their own forms of nefarious underhand tactics used by Vlakplaas and Eugene de Kock, to mention some of the methods that they employed. It was indeed a mutually antagonistic relationship, which was exposed by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who did well to bring attention to the various methods used by various opposing forces. Not only the two previous factors, but there was something else of grave importance to us. We had seen in Africa other examples of what happened when a colonial state handed over power. For example, in the Belgian Congo, there had been some horrific events as the liberating forces had turned on their ex-colonial oppressors. In other African countries, Asians had also become victims of brutality, just to mention an example such as Uganda. In South Africa during the 80s, we heard children chanting "One settler, one bullet," and we heard people chanting "Drive the whites into the sea." This instilled a sense of fear in our hearts, and as a result, we lacked the confidence to instill reforms. For the moment we let our guard down, we were afraid that we would be perhaps driven into the sea, or finally get the bullet that we perhaps deserved. It was only after 1990 that we began to see that there were people on both sides willing to back down. It was a very memorable day indeed when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and he stood up in front of the podium and said, "Take your knives, guns and pangas and throw them into the sea." One of the most pivotal pieces of apartheid history was P.W. Botha's Rubicon speech. I personally do not understand why the speech isn't more fully discussed on these YouTube discussions. The speech was drafted by Pip Botha with the intention of releasing Nelson Mandela and beginning a reform process. However, when P.W. Botha came to actually deliver the speech, it had completely changed. It was not the speech we had expected. In fact, he decided to go on with the old political order. I personally would like to know, especially from other YouTube viewers who remember the event much more clearly than I do, exactly why in 1984 P.W. Botha did not go through with the speech. Did he, like so many others like Marcos of the Philippines, or like so many South American dictators during the period of Operation Condor, simply take advantage of the Cold War to continue with their schemes? Or did NATO actually prevent him from going through with the reforms, as South Africa was of vital strategic importance during the Cold War? Britain and America particularly did not want to see the communists get their dirty little red paws all over South Africa. Likewise, was the war in Angola of great strategic use to Western countries to get the Eastern Bloc to waste valuable resources on a wasted cause? Or did the political climate of the 80s make it impossible to actually implement any true reform? With the Eastern Bloc finally out the way in the 90s, reform could continue, as the age of radicalism had come to an end. That will all depend where you stand within the South African political spectrum. If you come from those who support the liberation groups, you may regard your moral superiority as an absolute. Whereas if you were an unwitting supporter of the old apartheid regime, you may take the apologist approach. You may want to waiver all responsibility for your privileged life. And so I come to see videos where some people claim the end of apartheid happened when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Others will go for the latest date possible, that of the first free election. And so these historic and institutionalized differences shall continue in this new political debate.